Hello YouTube, hope you're all having a great day so far. My name is RISTE, your guide into Demacia, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Season 14 itemization, but not just that, we're also going to rank all the items you can build on Garen feasibly, and which ones stack up to be the best of the best, while we sort through the best and pick out some great ones, some noteworthy ones, and of course the mediocre ones. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, let me know in the comments if you guys disagree or agree. I think that a lot of the choices I'm going to be making, a lot of discussions I'm going to be making in this video is based on impressions of using the item, watching other people use the item, deciphering stats based on an item, and also just looking at statistics and win rates based on items. So there's going to be a lot of factors that determine what I deem good versus bad in terms of itemization for Garen. But there's going to be a lot of cool things to talk about. I hope you guys enjoy today's discussion. And yeah, let's go ahead and dive right into it. All right, here we go. All right, cool. All right, so we got the tier list pulled up here. So go ahead and start things off. Now, I have included here about 40 items. You will not see every single item in League of Legends. So a lot of items have been omitted. But any of the items that have been omitted should be items that I guess have stats that don't really benefit Garen in any shape or form. Talking about you, AP Garen mains out there. And then maybe some miscellaneous like baseline components, tier 1 components that like you pay like 300 gold for. So like you won't see things like cloth armor. However, I do want to put some recognition out there for the next tier of you know, components. So I'm gonna like reference like chain vest, like hearthbound axe, things like that. You guys will see it as we go on. All right, well, so here we go. Let's go ahead and start things off with Deadman's Plate. Now, Deadman's Plate is an item that got reworked this season a little bit to include slow resistance when fully stacked. The only trade-off here is that it doesn't do damage when you expend the stacks. And then overall, it's just pretty much the same item. It's got health, it's got armor, it's got movement speed, and it's just a really, really good mobility item. This is an amazing item, oftentimes, when you're pairing it with the Flash Ignite playstyle, because, again, I've said this many times before, when you guys are not taking Ignite on Garen, you guys can offer Ghost and Flash, and you can often free up your dependency on Demons. However, in most games where you are taking Flash Ignite, you often are dependent on getting Demons at some point, or some ability item. Demons is something that I find in my games not included in every build, but it definitely has its place, especially when you're trying to compensate for Garen's lack of late game, and especially in games where you do not have Ghost in conjunction with Flash. So therefore, I'm going to put it in Often Great, because I think this is an item that you should always be on lookout for. Sometimes it even goes in builds with Ghost and Flash. Like if you're playing versus an insane team comp, or they pick up Air Soul, you need a little bit of extra boost, this is often going to be great. The only reason I don't put it in the best is because there are some games where I don't include it. So, I think it deserves its place here. Often, build Deadmans often. You guys will find benefit from it, okay? Next item we're going to talk about is a pretty topical one, or pretty exclusive, I think, to Garen mid lane, because you probably aren't building a top lane. So, this is more so a mid lane Garen discussion. Boots of Mobility is insanely strong. It's even stronger this season when we factor in the reality of Garen losing mythics, you know, especially Stridebreaker. Garen's late game is definitely weaker, and with his mythic stacks going away on Stridebreaker, that means we're getting less movement speed late game. I find it that it's more difficult to achieve over 450 MS with various builds, because we're just not getting that benefit from like carving out a build with Stridebreaker as its base. Mythic stacks have definitely affected Garen holistically in the movement speed department, early, mid, and especially late game with the removal of mythic stacks. So I find that when it comes to roaming, like Garen has to dedicate a lot of sources to be as fast as he was in Season 13, and so on and so forth. Mobility boots, I think, are really good because this is a season where Garen has more abundant attack speed item sources, so he's not as dependent on Berserker Greaves, and I really do love that. And with combined with Celerity, you can achieve, what, 454 movement speed on Garen just by itself with no other movement speed sources, which is insane. insane. You can hold on to these boots for the majority of the game, and at that point, you maybe go ahead and scrap them. I recommend for you guys to try these boots out. You guys will love them. It's not something you would build every game, of course. So just like Deadman's Plate, we're going to put this in often great, because I do find the applications for it mid lane specifically are abundantly good, and you guys should definitely try it out, because you guys will find it surprisingly very good in games where you're tending the roam or match the roams of your opponent. All right, next up, we got Mercury Treads. So Mercury Treads are interesting because I think previous seasons, I think like Garen players were avoiding them like the plague. But ever since they changed the tenacity system for Garen and how tenacity is stacked, right now, with certain unique sources of tenacity, they stack additively with Garen's W. Mercury Treads is one of them. So like, let's say for example, you get Mercury Treads and you use Garen's W. You normally get 60% tenacity out of this W. With Mercury Treads, it is a flat addition of 30%, making 90% tenacity. And versus certain champions with extremely large crowd control, looking at you, Zoe, and Nico, and Ashe, Mercury Treads actually are really, really good. And they can often help cover scenarios where you're trying to save W for an important ability, like maybe Syndra's ultimate or Veigar ultimate, and you're often thrown into a mosh pit of crowd control, and you just can't get that Sterak's up and running yet. Lysandra, Nautilus, Veigar. I think Mercury Treads are really, really good in the right situation. But I find that I don't build them as often because, again, or I should say that Mercury Treads do have to compete with other tenacity sources. One thing I did not mention here is that tenacity is also more abundant this season than any other season because we have more items that offer tenacity, right? Sterak's offers tenacity, and it always has been, but it offers it right off the get-go. So now, if you have tenacity in your kit, you're not as punished for having any other tenacity items because you get it from the first second of a fight. You don't have to wait for the active to activate, or the passive to activate to get that 8 seconds of tenacity. It's just going to be there the entire game. Sure, it's going to be a little bit less, but I think it's an amazing trade-off, especially when you get to play the entire fight with tenacity from start to finish. So Mercury Treads definitely competes a little bit more. The only thing that makes it edge out above the competition is how accessible they are, especially when you're in a range matchup or a mage matchup mid lane. So I'm going to actually put Mercury Treads in amazing sometimes because it is definitely a little bit more of a situational choice. But if the context of the game supports it, you guys can definitely find a lot of great value to be had in Mercury Treads. All right. Moving on next, so let's go ahead and talk about Guardian Angel. Now, Guardian Angel was an item that I was building a lot last season just because I feel like Stopwatch, when contextually built, was insane. And, well, as you guys know, that Stopwatch is no longer part of the game, so the build path has changed for Guardian Angel. And as a result, people, I don't think, find Guardian Angels lucrative. I've been seeing a lot of people just, like, not build Guardian Angel in general just because, like, one thing that made Guardian Angel so great is just having access to Stopwatch, and then you just go ahead and upgrade it. So because of Guardian Angel losing Stopwatch, a lot of people have not been building it. And I find its place to still be very selective based on, like, the context of the game, right? It still is a very, very powerful pick in the right situation. I wouldn't include it in a build just for the sake of having it. Like, if I had to protect my bounty even, I would opt for Sterak's Gauge or, like, I don't know, like Sterak's Gauge or even, like, maybe a health or resistance item over something like Guardian Angel, unless, like, I really am worried about somebody blowing me up or executing me. Or, like, let's say, for example, we're dealing with someone with Pyke who penetrates shields, completely bypasses them with his ultimate, so Sterak's Gauge really doesn't have much value versus Pyke. But versus reset heavy team comps, the likes of Master Yi, Darius, Katarina, Guardian Angel is still going to find its place in your inventory with great application because, again, if they do proc the Guardian Angel, they do not get their reset, and that can deny some really, really crippling plays that get placed onto your team. So I'm going to say Guardian Angel is kind of, like, still amazing sometimes. It's just right above decent. I still don't build it too often, but I think, again, in the context of the right game, it is really, really good. All right, next up, we're going to talk about one of the most popular lethality items historically for Garen. It's definitely one of my favorites. Youmuu's Ghostblade is definitely back and better than ever. It still retains the lethality out of combat, in combat. The active is really good. The out of combat move speed is very comparable to Deadman's Plate. The only thing is I haven't seen it built too much top lane. I'm not saying you can't build it top lane. I'm just saying it's very dangerous to do. However, the item gives just about everything Garen would like if he wants to go for like a more classy, damage-oriented build. And I cannot deny that having it in your inventory feels amazing at any stage of the game, whether it be early, mid, or late game. I will say, though, that it's definitely more of a snowball-related item. And you probably aren't going to build it too often when you are behind. However, I can't say for certain that it's something that you shouldn't build when behind, because, again, there are some team comps where if you build health and armor, it doesn't really exactly address the threats of certain late game comps. Like, let's say, for example, I'm playing versus a Vayne. You could argue that it is actually wiser and smarter to get Youmuu's Ghostblade for kill pressure rather than Demon's Plate, because going a health and armor item versus a fed Vayne doesn't make any sense anyway. You want to be able to have the tools to be able to kill her to begin with. So it's for that reason that I'm going to put Youmuu's Ghostblade actually among the best. This is one of the best items you could ever build on Garen. And unless they nerf this thing to the ground, it's going to continue being one of the best items you could ever build on Garen. I think like Youmuu's is beyond legendary. So expect to see it in your item set. You should have it in your item set. It should always be a consideration and a possibility. Can Youmuu's Ghostblade go into my inventory? All right. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about Trailblazer. So Trailblazer is one of the first big competitors to Demon's Plate ever since the introduction of it, and then it being placed aside, Youmuu's Ghostblade. So like it's like the big three right now. We have Youmuu's Ghostblade, Trailblazer, and Demon's Plate. So like Trailblazer is interesting because it doesn't offer as much movement speed or damage or durability as Youmuu's Ghostblade or Demon's Plate in the respective stat categories I place them in. However, it's one particular advantage of it is it's very cheap to buy. Out of the trio, it's more affordable. It's 700 gold cheaper, and even though it's lacking in stats, the active, the passive is really valuable when you're actually frontlining, because the trail you leave behind is like similarly to the Elixir of Iron. It speeds up your teammates. So if you're the first person who's going in on fights to be able to cause chaos, disruption, or to bait the enemy team on you, I find that this is really, really good. You can often actually use it to actually help escape and to help your teammates escape too, because if they're following the same path you are, they will benefit from that movement speed boost. So in games where I'm planning on team fighting, of course, I think it has a lot of application, and it being able to fit it into your inventory so easily because of its price point is definitely such a lucrative selling point. Will I always build this item? No, I won't. Is this item valuable for split pushing? Absolutely not. You should be opting for probably Deadman's Plate for just a few hundred gold more. So it's got really, really good value, and I'm gonna say it's definitely a step above decent, and I would like to go ahead and use it more. It's definitely on my mind to be able to use more in more games, so I'm gonna say amazing sometimes here. I think Garen has always been viably able to build items meant for supports. I've tinkered around with these concepts for years now, and I do think that this is something you guys should consider if you guys are planning on team fighting, and you guys are just trying to complete items quickly, and you guys think it's going to be a quick game. There's nothing bad I could say about this item, other than, yes, it doesn't feel as great late game, because again, it's more so meant to be a support item. Alright, next up, let's talk about Sundered Sky. Sundered Sky had a really, really hype debut, and like, I have so many people coming into my stream just asking me about this item, because it just feels so great to have, and its stats are so attractive, along with a healing passive that there's so many top laners right now that are building it. And with it having a 6-second cooldown, it means that like Garen can proc this often in the same fight multiple times. And like, even though it does have a healing component, it's one of those healing components that Garen actually likes because it's based off of missing HP. And I think that's really good for helping Garen extend into longer fights, when Garen, unless he's taking Conquer, really doesn't really prefer the extended trade, because he's not really the best extended trade juggernaut. But I think if you guys are going in and getting scrappy with your fights, it's really, really good. Like, the crit is always good on Garen Q. It allows you to go ahead and nuke squishies, but it also allows you to bring a lot of threatening damage and sustain in fights with tanky like champions too, right? Taking on likes of Ornn, Zion, Malphite, you know, the whole 9 yards here. It is such an amazing follow-up to Trinity Force too, which we'll be talking about later on. But by itself, I think the only issue Thunder Sky has to deal with is that it has to compete with other items, because I will agree that like the concept of the item is not super unique. I think like what makes the item so attractive is that its stat line and its passive is just powerful, but it doesn't provide like such a unique like element to it that overrules any other possible choice, right? It's not omnipotent in that way. So for that reason, I'm gonna say that like I want to put it in often great, because I'm not building this every game. I feel like I'm not building this every game, but in the games where you're snowballing your head, you already have pre-established like first end going, and you know you're gonna commit to like an extended scrappy on hit build that maybe is burst heavy. You know, this fills and checks so many boxes that what Garen likes. So I'm gonna say Sundered Sky is often great. Borderlining with the best, because I feel like you can build it often, like almost every game on Garen, if you can actually afford it. And I feel like that's where I'm going to comfortably leave it. You know, I can't say anything really bad about this item. The design of this item is so amazing, and expect Garen players to continue building us until they nerf it. Alright, next up, we're going to talk about steel caps. Good old ninja tabs. So I just played a game versus a game today where the enemy team had 4 marksmen, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to build this first item. It's like, why not? It like, steel caps, you cannot discount this item ever. And there are games where I should be building it more. Like, it is nice to have Zerker Greaves, and it's always good to amplify your damage. But like, Garen has to sometimes play the damage soak, the damage sponge. And if you're in a situation where you have just everyone running circles around you, and you're more likely to get hit rather than hitting your opponent, I've run into team comps like this before, like super mobile heavy team comps, and you're more so just buying time waiting for your team to engage and get picks, steel caps are really good. They're also good for surviving in lane too. I mean, if you get steel caps first purchase, you can solve a lot of matchups, a ton, whether it be Quinn, Vayne, you know, like Darius sometimes, like Jax, Camille even. They are really situationally good. Doesn't mean that you get them all the time. I really feel like it's important for the Garen player to identify in champion select, okay, what type of team comp are they? Are they auto attack heavy? Is steel caps going to be my first purchase? If not, where are going to be my boots? And when am I going to build them? So I think like for that reason, I'm gonna put steel caps in often great, because like they are really, really good in the right context. But then again, you know, I mean, I feel like I maybe build them like maybe 1 or 2 out of every 10 games potentially, because like they're also really good when behind, but they're often like in the right team comps, they absolutely destroy. Like, steel caps have historically been some of the most amazing boots that have ever been created from Riot Games. So I actually drop it down to amazing sometimes. Like, in the right context, this item can single-handedly counter a team comp. I feel pretty comfortable with that. Next up, let's talk about rapid fire cannon. So rapid fire, if my information's correct, it's going to be building at a Zeal, I think, next patch, similar to Fandancer. So if that's the case, that's really good for the item. But right now, as it stands, RFC does not build at a Zeal, and I think that's the reason why I have not been touching the item at all. Even if it does get Zeal, it still remains a little bit of a mystery as to whether rapid fire cannon's going to be good. You know, this item is always favored towards range champions, so it's always been somewhat of a pseudo meme whether or not rapid fire cannon is good. And I think like with Garen having all the viable item choices he has this season, rapid fire cannon has a lot to compete with, even as a critical strike item. I think there's a lot in the air right now, up in the air with this item, and I could make a hard take on this, but I think that I'm most likely going to be wrong. So I'm going to put rapid fire cannon in mystery, because I think that we need to see how the item settles after its bow path adjustment. Oh wait, RFC is being told. Okay, someone's telling me that RFC actually does build out of Zeal. Okay. Wait, so I'm misinformed. Okay, so it does build out of Zeal. Okay, so you can actually build out of Zeal right now. Okay, I'm being mistaken. I'm a dummy. All right, so I still think my point still stands. I haven't tinkered with this item. I think it could have like some application in the future, but I haven't really itched for placing it in my inventory in a lot of my games. And I haven't seen too many Garen peers actually out for this item either. So I think like Rapid Fire Cannon is going to be like the wild card of Season 14. One of the wild card items. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm not saying it's good either. I think we need to keep it on the menu, keep experimenting with it, and then determine what to do from that point forward. So that's all I really have to say about that. Next up, we're going to talk about Berserker Graves. Like, do I really need to say much about this? I mean, Garen's dependent on attack speed. We have boots that are 1100 gold that gives Garen 45 MS and 35% attack speed. It's one of the first items you can build mid lane to automatically get online, be able to push, to be able to shove, to be able to take towers. You know, it's Garen's highest win rate boots. Statistically, you know, you can't go wrong with Berserker Graves. It's basically you're saying, I want damage. And no matter what Garen build you build with Berserker Graves, if you can afford them, if you don't have a high priority for other items, they are downright amazing. So, like, whether it be Conquer Garen, even Phase Rush Garen, benefits from these boots. Because if you're playing for damage scaling, you know, I mean, you get the attack damage from Gathering Storm, you get the attack speed from your items, and you just go ahead and pump out a build that can literally level anybody that you touch, in most cases, provided that you build the right stuff. So, Berserker Graves, I feel like I shouldn't harp on too much about this. It's part of the best, you know, until Garen ever gets reworked and he doesn't get so dependent on attack speed, it's just going to remain this way for this item. All right, now let's talk about Zeal. Oh, boy. All right. Extract the bias. Extract the bias. I have to extract the bias here. Zeal is, oh gosh, it's one of my faves. And they tried to like diminish the value of this as a component, but even after the nerf, it is so valuable for Garen. When it comes to movement speed and damage amplification, Zeal just hits so many check marks. The only problem that Zeal has been struggling with, like we mentioned earlier, is that Zeal's upgrade paths have been reduced from 3 to 2 because for some reason Zeal presently does not upgrade into Phantom Dancer. However, they are apparently fixing this with 14.2 along with the Garen buffs. So now you can sit on your Zeal or double Zeal and upgrade one of them to PD, and now that is actually a viable option. The strength of double Zeal returns essentially in 14.2. And just sitting on this item, if you do not have a dire need for another component to sit on, is just so great because a little bit of critical strike goes a long way on Garen. Even if you sit on 15% the entire game, there will be spins that literally pump out like maybe 20 to 30% extra damage just because you have that critical strike value online compared to not having that component and having 0% crit chance. Yes, Zeal's damage output is dependent on RNG if it's its sole critical strike item. But there are still, like, games where you could maybe go in the future where you go double Zeal into Mortal Minder to get you 50% crit and then watch as your damage soars. So for that reason, I'm going to say Zeal is among the best of the best. It is one of the best component items you can build. If the only exception is if you direly need another component. So I'm talking about this in the context of 14.2. If I was to make this tier list and say, hey, this is going to be the list for 14.1, I would probably say it's amazing sometimes. But, you know, you can't go wrong with Zeal. Zeal is just downright amazing. Now, let's dive into discussion on Warmogs because I feel like Warmogs is sleeping so heavily on Garen right now. I think that if there's any shot that Garen has for using Warmogs this season, this would be the season for it. Its iteration is surprisingly viable. You get the health, regen, although the requirement is a bit steeper. You need 1100 bonus health instead of what was it, 1000 or 900? I don't exactly remember the number. You guys might be able to reference that for me. So it is a bit steeper. You know, you can't exactly get a second item. You're going to need it and a component if you truly want to get Warmox second. What I've done is like Warmox and Ruby Crystal if you really want to force it. But dang, this item giving 15% movement speed. It starts with 5, so like you get 5 permanently. But if you're out of combat, it gives you an extra 10. I think that's downright amazing. To the point where this item almost competes with the movement speed of Demon's Plate, Trailblazer, and Yomo's Ghostblade. And just like supercharging Garen's passive to the point where you can heal back up, it makes this item, I think, incredible versus PokeV team comps. Like, I would want to build this versus Zoe, because like Zoe's build will hit you with a tremendous ton of flat tree damage because of the Sleepy Triple Bubble conversion. But like, if you're a team comp that has to have somebody in front to be able to soak up all these skill shots, I think Warmox has great application. And I think that you guys should keep it on the radar. I haven't been including it in too many builds because I feel like it does compete with some other choices right now. And its identity doesn't feel fleshed out enough to say, hey, I have to build Warmox this game. But even if you were to build it in a side lane to maybe deal with some split pushers, I still think it is really, really cool to have. And I hopefully am not blinded by that coolness factor because I do think that it is good. I think it just requires the right context and the right game to be able to build it. So I'm going to say Warmogs right now is, well, it could be in the mystery category. Like, it could be in the mystery category. Like, it is a mystery item. But I also want to say it's decent too. But I think it's like its true nature is undetermined right now. So I'm gonna put it in the mystery category. Definitely keep an eye on it on the radar, guys, because I do think that there's gonna be some Garen main out there that makes the execution of this item look really, really cool. Next up, we'll talk about Swifties. So Swifties are actually really, really good. In the right game, of course. You know, I think that Soul Resistance is a little bit more accessible than Demon's Plate, you know, because of obviously the price point. But like, since Demon's Plate gives slow resistance, you know, Swifties now has to compete with another core item for Garen. However, like, let's say for example you're playing versus Cassio Swain or Cassio like Aurelion Soul. Like, let's say it's Cassio Pia top lane and Aurelion Soul middle. Well, I'm not building Demons versus that. That's going to be a Swifties game because I do not want to build an armor item versus 2 mages that give me slow resistance. So on the context of the game, Swifties can be downright amazing. I often find, too, that these are the only boots that can actually contend with a really good Ashe player. Whether they have high EPM or they're scripting, like, it's almost impossible to get on top of an Ashe unless you're Shotgun and Ghost. And you have that brief window to be slow resistant because you're using Q. Certain champions are really dismantled by these boots choices. You know, you're going to find a lot of boots in this category that I'm rating here. But yeah, Swifties boots are amazing sometimes. You know, any boots, I guess, in League of Legends are amazing sometimes, depending on the context of the game. So I really can't get too spicy with my answer here. It really comes down to the judgment and discretion as to what boots are really valuable for the context of your game, guys. So again, you know, Swifties, you can't go wrong with them. Unless the enemy team comp has no slows, then you're probably better off building something else. Bonus points, though, if you build these boots mid lane with, like, Phage, because, like, there are some certain range matchups that you could really solve with these boots because of the target access provided with the, you know, 60 bonus movement speed, plus, you know, Garen using Q or Phage, for that matter. Next up, let's talk about Hollow Radiance. So we finally got a magic resistance Sunfire item, which is really, really cool. This is, I think, what, its first season, our first season where we actually have a magic resistance Sunfire item. And I think that the stats feel really nice. I haven't looked up the item's gold efficiency, but I do like this a lot more than Sunfire Cape. Specifically because you're Q-maxing in a lot of mage matchups compared to some melee matchups where you do benefit from Spin Max. Most mage matchups don't benefit from Spin Max unless you have, like, an early Air Drake and you can get on top of them super easily. Like, I'm thinking about a mage that you can get on top of super easily. You know, I'm thinking about this. I'm prompting myself to think about this, but, like, it's really hard to get on top of mages because, like, they often have a hard crowd control ability, or they have some sort of movement speed boost, or they have a dash, or they just don't have any of those things and they take phase rush. So like Rise is a good example here. Well, yeah, well, he's got a snare too, so there's that. I'm gonna say, like, generally speaking, you're gonna be Q-maxing into a lot of matchups, but like when it comes to playing Garen mid lane, the one penalty that you do suffer with, even though Garen's wave clear is still really good, is the penalty of Q-maxing and your wave clear not being that great. So there is where Hallowed Radiance comes in. And I do think versus certain champions, especially the AP Assassins, that this item is contextually amazing. So I think that you can offer this item if you want to be tankier, you guys want to deal with your matchup, or if you're in a situation where you're behind, you can build this. However, I will have to say, though, that this item has to compete with something more conventional because, like, you could say, oh, RISTE, let's go ahead and build Hallowed Radiance. But then we ask ourselves, okay, do I really want to build this when I could just go ahead and build Stridebreaker, which is getting buffed next patch. And Stridebreaker can also not only allow me to live because it's got health, but it also gives me target access onto that champion who's giving me so much problems. So I'm trying to sing. There are a good amount of Garen players who don't even consider this item. So is it underrated? Yes. Is it appropriate to build? Always. No, I don't think so. So I think like how I would want to rate this item is only good at behind. Or I could just say it's decent. Like, it remains to be seen whether this item is going to be picked over something such as Stridebreaker Rush when the item gets buffed in 14.2. However, I do think it's something to keep your out on your radio for, because like upgrading bombies has always been something that people have been asking me about, and something that you should maybe consider too. But it really depends if you're really behind, I think. Is it good when you're even? I think it can be good when you're even. If I'm 0-0 versus a Kali, I definitely think it's alright. So that's why I'm going to rank it as decent instead of only good at behind. Next up, let's talk about Bomby Cinder. Okay, so I've been preaching the Bomby Cinder choir for some time now. I've even turned some of the non-believers into believers. But the discourse here is that, yeah, Bomby Cinder is a component item that just offers health. But, one thing it does too is proc phase rush, so that's really cool. And then it also really helps with Q-maxing your builds because, again, since you guys are Q-maxing, you're going to be lacking on wave clear. Bomby Cinder offers a little bit of wave clear. It's just really, really good. Even though the item doesn't really edge out of the competition with gold efficiency, health stacking is something that's incredibly valuable on Garen for the sole purpose that, like, sometimes in order to win lane, you actually have to fight that war of attrition. So I'm talking about, like, Pantheon. I'm talking about Akali. Maybe even Diana, like, sometimes. I think that Bombies is really, really amazing sometimes. Like, there are some matchups where it's really bad, though. It's amazing some games, and then it's also bad in some games specifically. So, like, if you're playing versus Irelia, don't do it. If you're playing versus Yone, don't do it. If you're building versus Yasuo, well, it's kind of dangerous because all those champions can build Blade their own king. But yeah, like, versus certain champions where stacking health is important. You want to amplify your W because you're trying to, like, keep healthy. You want to go ahead and win by out-sustaining them, not by trying to, like, stack as much damage as you can. Like Mordekaiser, Pantheon, Akali. Bomby Cinder should be a consideration for you because sometimes in order to win, you gotta play that War of Attrition. So sometimes, Bomby Cinder is amazing. Alright. Next up, let's talk about Spectre's Cal. Spectre's Cal is... I think has always really been good. It's a little bit harder to build because there were previous seasons where it was 1100 gold. Now it's 1250. So it's definitely a steep component purchase. However, I cannot deny the fact that in some matchups, like, you need it to be able to survive. Like, I have no doubt in my mind that, like, there are some matchups that just absolutely destroy Garen. If you don't rush this item, you are going to die, and you're going to die very painfully. So, like, a good example of this would be Azir, like a really good Azir player. You could maybe even build it versus Zoe. Like, if you're behind versus TMO and you're holding on for dear life, you might as well just try to stay healthy, get as much EXP as you can. So, Spectre's Hell has always been one of those break glass in cases of emergency items. You oftentimes are only building it early game when you're in a extremely painful pinch. Or if it's just sitting in your inventory late game because you're trying to build up the Spear Visage, which, you know, has its place, and it's a pretty decent item stats-wise. So I'm going to put this in only get it behind, because realistically, I will only rush Spectre's Cal in matchups where I plan on going, you know, Hallowed Radiance, or if I say, you know what, I just need to focus on surviving because I have no chance of actually winning this laning phase. So again, break the glass in case of emergency. That'll be really, really good. All right. We got a Hull Breaker to talk about, which is coming up here. Hull Breaker is really interesting because we thought that the item would be really bad with its rework because it lost like the armor magic resistance buff that you would get when you're isolated. And the removal of that was really, really concerning to just try to dissect. But like now we have people who are even rushing at middle. Some of you guys are even in chat right now. You guys are rushing at top lane. You guys are rushing at first item. And what's interesting is that you stack it up on minions, and the detonation can apply to either structures or champions, which is kind of insane. Like, if you stack this with Trinity of Force and, like, Sundered Sky, you could literally just go ahead and half-health champions, blow them up. And the damage is really deceptive, too. I cannot discount the fact that this item is still amazing for split pushing. And if you guys are planning on split pushing, or even just spending most of the game in side lane, you will benefit from Hullbreaker just because the stats are still amazing. And the passive, if you can proc it successfully, can chunk champions like no tomorrow. So I'm going to say it's often great. The only reason why I'm not going to say it's part of the best is because I don't think it is that great of a teamfight item. Because you would have to stack it. The only way you could stack it up in teamfights is by hitting enemy champions 5 times by auto attacks, and I just feel like that's a little bit too unrealistic for Garen. But if it wasn't for that factor, I would probably rank it among the best of the best. All right. So let's go ahead and pivot here a little bit, and we're going to actually talk about a starting item. We've been talking about a lot of components and legendary items. Let's actually talk about a component. So we got a few components on this list here that we're getting through, and the first one is Doran's Blade. Now, Doran's Blade had changed recently, where it's no longer offering Omnivamp, which is something that Garen never really valued just because his spin only yields 1/3 effectiveness on Omnivamp. Little fun fact if you guys didn't know that. You could argue, oh, well, it's better to have Omnivamp than Lifesteal in Garen because Garen's spin doesn't even proc Lifesteal. That is true. What they did to compensate is they buffed the value from, 2% or 1.5% Omnivamp to 3.5% Lifesteal. And in between Garen's spins is a lot of auto-attacking. There might have to be somebody who mathematically dissects this, but I still think that Doran's Blade, in the context of just sustain, is still really good because, like, in between trading, you're hitting minions, you're last hitting them, you're queuing them. So sustain's really good, and then it still offers 10 attack damage, which is really good for matchups where you're intending on fighting the champion early to win. I'm talking about Riven. I'm talking about Irelia. You could, if you're daring enough, you can even take it versus Tryndamere if you want to. Oh god. I think it's good versus matchups where you just basically flat out win early if you're confident enough, like Fizz, Talon, Diana. So I still think that Doran's Blade is really good on Garen. I'm not dissuaded by the fact that it has Lifesteal, because I still think the application of the item is good if you're planning on playing aggressive and you don't need Doran's Shield. So for that reason, I'm going to put this in often great. Although, you know, I don't know the percentage of games where I do get Doran's Blade over D-Shield. I do think that D-Shield is probably my most purchased item. So for that reason, we might want to bump it down to Amazing sometimes, because I do think in the context of the game where you can play aggressive, you don't need Doran's Shield, there's no better starting item to play an aggressive level 1, level 2. Alright, next up, let's talk about Sterix Gauge. So I really think that even though it got changed a little bit to offer tenacity from the get-go, as we referenced before in this video, it's still an amazing item. You should still try to build it almost every game. It has very little to no competition, and you can get the Sterix Shield anywhere from 1k to 2k late game, depending on your Garen build. Like, this thing offers you over 70 attack damage late game, which is a very scarce thing in a lot of Garen items. What's to complain about Sterix? I think, like, there's nothing bad I could ever say about the item, other than it's probably not a good first item, and you probably don't want to build it second. That's the only qualms I have about the item. Other than that, this item is legendary. Not by its name, but what it does for Garen. And it's among the best of the best. Alright? Stridebreaker. Strikebreaker is getting buffed next patch to include even more stats. I don't know if this is going to last forever, because I think like one of the reasons they're buffing Strikebreaker so much is because of they want people to purchase the item. They want people to feel good about it again, even though it's not a mythic, which they're kind of doing this emergency recovery type of like buff stat line type of maneuver for a lot of items. Strikebreaker is not the only one. The item is really good at locking down range targets, and you can proc it with melees too. However, the only qualm about Strikebreaker that I have this season is that it has to compete with Profane Hydra. Profane Hydra is the competitor to Strikebreaker, which is really, really good. It still requires no halt and movement to be able to activate it, which I think is good. I don't know if anybody knows or can confirm if they because like I know they're adding Tiamat to Profane. I don't know if they're ever going to remove the halt movement for Profane, which is the only qualm I have with Profane, but we'll talk about that in a second or a minute. But I do think that Strikebreaker can be included in your inventory almost every game, especially in games where you do need to lock somebody down, because the slow is still as powerful as before, and the stat line's really good, and it's about to get a lot better. Will it be a first item that you buy every game? No, it won't be. A lot of games, yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna say it's often great. If you guys build this like 6 out of your 10 games, that's like realistic for me. So that's all I have to really say about Strikebreaker. It's still good. Still look to buy it. All right, next up, let's talk about Trinity Force. Now there has not been a game where I say to myself, you know what, Trinity Force is just not gonna work here. Trinity Force is just not gonna work out. Unless I'm super critically behind to the point where I need to get build tank I have to tank item to provide value to my team. Trinity Force is just been always such a solid pickup for me, and it just has almost everything you could want to amplify Garen as a champion. Like it's basically the super serum to Captain America. You know, it is incredibly good. I'm so happy it's back. I'm so happy you can splash it into any Garen build, and there's just like, it not only just gives everything that Garen wants, but it also frees up your dependency on Berserker Greaves in some builds, because it offers 33% attack speed, and not too many items were offering that amount of attack speed as a compensation for giving up Berserker Greaves last season. You know, I think like the only competitor, like the only item that could actually achieve that would be maybe What's End or Phantom Dancer, right? So it's for that reason that I'm going to say Trinity Force is among the best of the best. Like, literally, I have nothing bad to say about this item. Like, you should expect to build it almost every game. And I'd be very crazy to say that you would not build it in a lot of games. But, you know, the only exception is when you have to play, like, oh, I'm massively behind him 0-10. I gotta play tank mode. All right, so that's about it for Trinity Force. All right. So I already talked about Bombi Cinder. I don't know why I included that, so I'm going to bump it down to the bottom list here. We're going to talk about Spirit Shojin next. Spirit Shojin is really interesting. It's one of those items that actually activate when Garen spins. Now, the only item that I can think about that reliably activates when Garen spin is Black Cleaver. Historically, over the years, like there's been a lot of items with really cool concepts, but when it comes to activating those concepts, it's all about auto attacks, and Garen's spin just doesn't do it. Or it's situations where Garen's spin only applies one instance. I'm talking about Ravenous Hydra, by the way, because Ravenous Hydra only procs once when you use spin. If it activated on every single spin, it'd be a busted item. But Spirit Shojin comes out of the woodwork here, and now it can be fully stacked with spin, which is really, really weird. I haven't been building this item too much, but the stat line is very solid. And it being able to amplify Garen's spin damage is definitely something that should not be discounted for. I've been having people come into my stream asking me to try this item out. And I think that there is a lot of testing and evaluation I still need to make on this item. The only problem that this item has is that it has to compete with a lot of other choices, which is the issue with other items in particular. I don't know why, but there's been a lot of games I've been playing that Spirit Shojin just naturally doesn't come to mind. So I think that this item needs to be solved a little bit more, because numerically it has a damage amp on, you know, Garen's spin, right? But like, what do those numbers look like? And like, unfortunately, this is where like my analysis kind of falls a little bit short, because I don't know exactly how those numbers play out. And I haven't seen too many Garen players like really just jump up for joy that this item can be built And oftentimes when I see a lot of people's 3-core item builds, Spare Shojin is often omitted. So is this item just not good enough to be included in Garen's core build? Or is it sleeper waiting to be awakened by the right sequencing of items? I don't exactly know yet. But some people really love it. I'm going to deem it a mystery, though, because I think that it maybe has a place in some sequences of items. I'm not going to call it bad because I do see its potential, but I just don't know yet. It's one of those questions of where does it fit? How does it be at the competition, right? What makes it unique? All right, so moving on here, we got Gale Force next. I think they removed Gale Force. I'm pretty certain that Gale Force got removed. So I don't know why I uploaded it. I'm a dummy. Please disregard. We're going to go ahead and move on. Next up is going to be Phantom Dancer. So Phantom Dancer still doesn't give Garen bonus spins other than the base stats. You get 7% movement. Sorry, you get what? 10% movement speed. 10% movement speed permanently. That is kind of insane. That's basically double Zeal right there. I think that's amazing. I think there's some games where you have an Air Drake. You could say, let's forget Deadmans. Let's forget Trailblazer. Let's forget Youmu's. I'm just going to get Phantom Dancer. I'm going to sit in a side lane, and I'm going to have value. It's got attack damage, crit, movement speed. It's a really good Garen item. But I will say for certain that it's going to get the most value when you're committing to split pushing. And that's one of the reasons why I really can't call it the best of the best, because I'm not ever going to say, you know what, I need Phantom Dancer to help me with team fighting. So in the category of split pushing, it's really good. So because of that, I'm going to say it's often great. The only reason is that team fighting with this item just doesn't feel the best, or doesn't feel superior to other items. All right. I want to talk a lot about like Serpent's Fang, but I feel like there's not much to say about it. It's still a great item selectively and situationally as it was last season. You're going to build it in games where shields are being stacked, and Garen is one of the best applicants of this item because it can apply. He can apply AoE, which means he's hitting multiple targets with this spin. That's the reason why we're going to put it in Amazing sometimes, because like there are games where they have only 1 or 2 shields on the enemy team, and you're like, I don't want to build this. You know, it's just not worth it enough. You need a very specific reason, a very specific team comp to build this in. And this is basically going to be the Achilles heel of certain team comps to punish in the solo queue. They will surface, so you should always be on the lookout for it. Okay? Even if that means through itemization, like, let's say there's several Juggernauts on their team. You know, they're probably going to be building stacks at some point. Okay, Serpent's Fang emerges as a needed item. All right? Let's go back to the world of components and stardate items. So you guys know I've been a big advocate of Ruby Crystal 2 Pot because of its easy accessibility with a 600 gold upgrade into Balmy Cinder. And I think that it's been harder for me to go Ruby Crystal 2 Pot because Riot Games came descending from the sky, slam dunking us with a Doran Shield buff. And it's been harder to justify going Doran Shield when, I'm sorry, to go Ruby Crystal when Doran Shield now has 110 health, which means Ruby Crystal now only offers a 40 health advantage with an extra potion. I think that Ruby Crystal, unfortunately, even though I don't like saying this, isn't as good this season as Season 13 pre-Doran Shield buffs. Doran Shield is just amazing for sustain. Its health is very comparable to Ruby Crystal. And I think that unless you guys are very deliberate in building Balmy Cinder, you shouldn't really look to build Ruby Crystal too much. So it's for that reason, I'm going to say Ruby Crystal 2 Pot is decent. It's not particularly as great as it used to be. And my heart kind of feels a little sad for saying that, but the only application you get for Ruby Crystal 2 Pot is if you're going to immediately upgrade into Balmy Cinder. If you're not, then you should probably go for a different starting item. All right, let's talk about Voltaic. Am I saying this correctly? Voltaic Cyclosword. Let me look this item up really quickly, because I want to get a refresh before I say what I'm about to say, because I feel like I don't want to disrespect the people who say really nice things about this item. And I've had a lot of people prompting me to talk about this item, so here we go. We're talking about it. Some champions pilot this item extremely well to the point where you're rushing this item. I think for the element of burst, you know, and just like what it can do for you is really, really cool. It offers ability haste, attack damage, and lethality. Like, stacking this item is even amplified with dashes, so that's like really, really cool. The only problem though is that Garen doesn't have these dashes, so like I can understand why people like maybe Talon or Kiana even want to consider this item, but because like Garen doesn't really have a way to cheese the item's generation of stacks, it's for that reason why I haven't really considered building it too much. It's a very glass cannon item, so like if we ever want to go glass cannon item first, then automatically it's placed into a boat with 10 other items that can be built first because they're also glass cannon items. Yomu's Ghostblade. I feel like what this item does for certain champions does not qualify Garen to be among that said list. I could be wrong. Like, maybe this item is sleeper OP, but like, even though some people might say, oh, RISTE, it's got a massive slow when you touch your target. I'm like, yeah, that's nice and stuff, but there's a lot of situations where if you are already touching your opponent with damage, you're kind of already solving that situation where hypothetically you think is an issue because of the slow applied through Cyclist Sword helps you stay on top of your target. Garen, if he stays on top of his target, it's either solved because you're already on top of them, or it's not because you can't even get on top of them in the first place, which is something that Cyclist Sword does not do in the first place. So it's for that reason where I'm going to say that Cyclist Sword is a mystery. I don't want to say it's bad. Like, maybe there's somebody who can engineer this item to be good on Garen. I do think that, like, Fleet Footwork Garen would be really interesting to pop with this item, so I'm not going to count it out just yet. That's maybe the only saving grace I would have to say about putting this item in the bad category, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of retaliation from my community if some people say it's bad. I don't want to be so quick to judge it, but it's definitely a little bit of a mystery. Next, let's talk about Titanic Hydra. Titanic Hydra, most of its value comes through auto-attacking because it has a conversion of bonus HP to flat damage on every auto-attack that Garen has. Now, Garen is a champion who doesn't auto-attack that much. He auto-attacks a little bit, like a moderate amount. And the active does apply a stack of Phase Rush, which is interesting, to say the least. But when it comes to Hydra items, I feel like that Garen just does not benefit enough from this. Like, yeah, there's some cool combos because it has an auto attack reset, so you could technically go ahead and auto you and then Titanic Hydra, which is a really interesting combination. I was trying to experiment with it back in season 8, 9, you know, for funsies, but I never really yielded anything that was too positive of a result from it. Other than maybe some cheese ones. I'm not going to say this is a good item on Garen. I could be wrong, but I'm not going to say it's good. I'm going to say it's actually kind of bad. I really can't see a Garen player ever build this over something like Profane Hydra, or even if we're feeling spicy, Ravenous Hydra. So, that's all I really have to say about Titanic. I'm sorry to Titanic fans, but I just don't see the potential here. Let's go ahead and talk about Ravenous Hydra next. So Ravenous Hydra is probably not the strongest contender in the Hydra line. Profane Hydra definitely has that spot. But I do think it's slightly better than Titanic Hydra. Just because like its stats are really, really good. Its active is also really, really nice too, which also does proc Phase Rush. The only interesting thing here is that it doesn't have the Omnivamp that its previous iterations have. It's Lifesteal, which is another fickle thing on Garen because he doesn't really benefit from Lifesteal too much. Yeah, I mean, it's a very gold-efficient item. I mean, let's look at it. 70 attack damage, right? 70 flipping attack damage. That is pretty substantial. But at the same time, too, I have to say, like, it's going to have to compete with a lot of other Garen choices, as I said many times before. And it makes me wonder if I would ever want to build something like this over, like, Profane Hydra, or even Black Cleaver, or even Sterak's Siege, for that matter. Does that mean that there's a situation where Ravenous Hydra should be built? I'm not saying that, but until I see that, I'm going to say it's maybe a step above Titanic Hydra, but it doesn't exactly make the purchase of this item essentially good. So I'm going to put it a little bit above Titanic, but I still think it's a rather bad consideration because it doesn't do enough for Garen that really reaches out and screams, build me, you know? All right, with that said, Profane Hydra will be the next item we're talking about here. One of the new emerging items from Season 14. It halts your movement when you use the active, but that active does proc Phase Rush, which is really, really incredible. Has the splash AoE from Ravenous, so it's actually pretty similar to Ravenous. And it offers health too, I believe, which is actually really, really good on Garen. Actually, wait, am I mistaken? Maybe it doesn't offer health. Wait, hold on. I'm trolling you guys. No, hold on. Let me just pull up the page here really quickly. I meant to just look up this item before I start this video, but I'm being mistaken. No, it doesn't offer health. It's attack damage, ability haste, and lethality. So I think that this is probably a better choice because Garen values lethality much better than he values lifesteal. So what I've been seeing, even though I haven't been the best pilot of this item, I've been seeing Garen players build this second item after building their Trinity Force as a way to go ahead and make Phase Rush Garen work without having to opt into Strikebreaker. And I do agree that if you are ahead with when you are ahead with Phase Rush, you don't need to go into Strikebreaker, especially if you're taking Ignite, and that can be used as a catalyst for activating the rune. So I think that for that reason, Profane Hydra actually has really good purchase and application. My only qualm about the item is that it halts Garen's movement. So like if you're trying to chase a ranged target and you need to proc Phase Rush in a critical moment, that means that you are going to halt your movement to change that target, and that could sometimes cost you the kill because of that brief window of movement. Happened before when I've tried using Tiamat to proc Phase Rush in Season 9. That was one of the reasons why I stopped building Tiamat. And I feel like that problem is going to return for me if I choose to build Profane Hydra too much. So I think, summarizing all that, where I'm going to rank Profane Hydra is amazing sometimes. I don't build it in too many of my games. And honestly, if I was to not take Phase Rush, I don't even know if I'd be building it at all. But I do think as an activation item for applying a stack of Phase Rush, it can situationally be maybe the best choice you have, which is something that should not be discounted. All right, so that's all I really have to say. So one item that I love to keep in my head as a potential buy, and like some item that I wish could just be built every game, but I don't know, we still gotta be in the kitchen, we're still cooking with it. But I just want this item to be so good, and I'm trying to put my bias aside here. Let's talk about Infinity Edge. So Infinity Edge, unfortunately, Infinity Edge is a very, very fickle item because the item is never going to be balanced around Bruisers or Juggernauts for that matter. You know, like very rarely will Yasuo and Yone ever influence this item because this item is always catered for the largest class of champions that use it, aka marksmen, ADCs. So it's really hard to invest into Infinity Edge for long term because this item goes through so many iterations, even more than Rise gets reworks, and that's saying something. I would love for Infinity Edge to be a viable pickup. Who knows? Maybe it is still good. Maybe it's amazing to buy. I've only tried it out a little bit, and it's really hard for me to find a situation where I say to myself, you know what? I want to put IE in my inventory here. But oh my god, this item is so fun. I will say, however, that this item can probably not shine unless you have a dedicated critical strike build, which means you're probably not going to build it unless you already have a big crit item in your inventory, or two of them, like maybe Mortal Reminder or Lord Dominic's. Maybe a Zeal on top of it. But what I'm picturing is if you were to go for a build that goes Trinity Force, Mortal Reminder, double Zeal into IE, and then finish your build with Lord Dominic's, you could do an insane amount of damage. Granted, this is a very Glass Canyon helicopter build, but still, it just seems so fun to think about. And I always see the potential there for Infinity Edge being in someone's inventory, not just for the memes, but just like to really like crank up Garen's damage, because like amplifying his critical strike ratio is like such a disastrous concept for the enemy or whoever he touches. The only problem though is that like if you're gonna opt for a late game damage amplification item, you're often probably going for Mortal Reminder or Dominic's. So Infinity Edge unfortunately has to compete with a lot of other choices, like Lord Dominic's, Mortal Reminder, Serpent's Fang. So it's for that reason that I can't say that Infinity Edge is exactly good, but I don't want to say it's bad either. I do think that maybe this item has potential. You know, it's out there. It's creeping. Maybe one day someone can engineer a build to make IE work, and I can't wait for it. I would love to try it. keep experimenting with IE, guys. I want to see it on people's radars, because I do think that it has potential. All right. You know what? I forgot what this item is called. Gosh darn it. All right. Okay, wait, hold on. It's what's this item name? I thought I learned all the names here. It's Rectrix. Okay. Oh gosh. You know, no wonder I couldn't remember it. Retrix. So they call this item Retrix, and it's an interesting component because it offers attack damage and movement speed, which is really interesting. I feel like it's like I feel like it's the Wario of Zeal, right? It's like kind of like the rival item, right? With Zeal, it's movement speed and attack speed, and critical strike. With Retrix, it's attack damage and movement speed. And this item is bundled with the build path of many items that Garen can build. One of them, most notably, is Yoma's Ghostblade. So it's actually rather interesting because 4% movement speed basically equates to like maybe 15 MS for Garen, which is almost a pair of tier 1 boots. You maybe edge a little bit closer to that number with Celerity, of course. Maybe get an extra 2 MS or something like that. I don't know the numbers exactly, but that's just hypothetical for me. It's an interesting component. It really is. Like, whenever it's in my inventory, it doesn't feel bad. The only question I ever impose on myself is, okay, was this the right purchase? Because oftentimes, like, the other side of the tree that has the build path that's leading to the item that you're trying to complete, let's say, for example, Yuma's Ghostblade. Okay, like, I went for this item, you know, I went for this component, I went for Retrix, but should I have went Dirk instead? You know, should I have went for Caulfield's? Like, it's really, really... It's really strange. Like, I think this component is really good to pick up. I think there's just a lot of solving that remains to be done on this item. So I think for that reason, it's probably amazing sometimes, right? I do think for kill pressure in your lane, I would probably opt for Dirk or Zerker Greaves for that matter, right? Because let's be honest, 4% MS is not beating out 45 if we want to rush tier 2 boots mid lane, if we're going to go for Ghostblade. So, like, there is that. So I think that it's a comfortable place. Definitely a comfortable place. All right, next up, let's talk about this item, which I also forgot. All right, gosh darn it. What is this item? What is this item? This item's name, oh gosh, it is Unending Despair. Okay, Unending Despair. 400 health, 55 armor, 10 ability haste. When in combat with champions, every 7 seconds, deals 0 magic damage to nearby enemy champions, healing for 250% damage of the damage dealt. So, like, this is a Drain Tank fantasy. Like, this is the item that is match made in heaven with Zac. Any other tank that maybe wants to brawl and bruise it up, maybe Cassante values this item. I have to be honest with you guys, I don't think Garen's really building this thing. Unless you're taking Conquer and you're going to go for a tanky Conquer Garen build, I just don't think that you're ever going to get value out of this item unless you're amplifying it with Spirit Visage and Conqueror. So, like, if you take Ghost Flash Garen, you guys want to try this item out, let me know. You guys have tried this item out already? Let me know in the comments what you guys think about it. Maybe it's got potential. I don't think it's something that can't be built on Garen, but I just don't see anybody building it right now. I don't see anybody building it in general, so, like, maybe this item has some sort of potential. But I'm just, like, not seeing it right now. I'm not gonna say it's bad either, so I'm gonna say it's a little bit of a mystery. You know, we just don't know about this. All right. Moving on to Umbral Glaive. Umbral Glaive has changed maybe a little bit over the years, but it still is the identity of just taking out wards. And I have people asking me about this item all the time. Like, if it's viable enough. I've always been massively skeptical since Umbral Glaive, and I've never really ever glanced at it unless they do some sort of stupid buff that makes it insanely gold efficient. Every assassin and some ADCs, Misfortune support are buying it to the point where we're seeing Misfortune support, and then nerf the items. So I'm like, okay, great, I can try this out for a week, make a clickbait YouTube video off of it, and then just gets nerfed X patch. So, like, that's always fun, right? That's always fun. And the item stats are not too bad, but I think that, like, if we ever want to use the Lethality item for early roaming and taking out wards, we're probably going ahead using Yoma's Ghostblade and just comboing that with Sweeper. I think this is just best for certain assassins or certain supports. I just don't think Garen is one of those champions. I think that dewarding is something that can conveniently be done with Sweeper, especially in positions when you're ahead, and you should only realistically build a lethality item if you're ahead, with some exceptions. So I think it's for that very reason that I'm not going to call Umbral good. In fact, I'm going to call it bad. I think it's something that you should never realistically, deliberately go for. Alright, next up, let's talk about Tiamat. So this item procs Phase Rush. It's really cool. And now it's building into Stridebreaker. So now we actually have our Iron Spec Whip back, but lo and behold, guys, it's Tiamat. The active is really good. The range is still as good as Iron Spike, which is actually really, really cool. And it definitely benefits Garen's Wave Clear, especially in situations where you're Q-maxing, as we may have referenced many situations before in this video. I'm not going to reiterate it. I think it's actually really great. The only problem is that it's not featured in too many of Garen's core items. The biggest one, obviously, of course, is going to be Stridebreaker, and maybe, if you do choose to opt for it, it's going to be their Profane Hydra. So I think it is amazing sometimes. The only time you're really building it is when you're going to upgrade it. I would never build this item if I'm not planning to upgrade it. I just don't think it's that component. It has to compete with way too many better choices. So, I think that's where I want to keep it for now. Now let's talk about the Brutalizer. So the Brutalizer, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't have lethality. It's got attack damage and it's got CDR, if I recall correctly. Attack damage and CDR. Where is this item on the client? Is it not here anymore? Brutalizer. Okay, here it is. There we go. Okay, actually, no, I'm mistaken. It has some lethality. It's got 25 attack damage, 10 ability haste, 8 lethality. So like this is a very, very insane component. It builds into Profane Hydra. So this is probably going to be the most accessible item that you can actually put into your inventory. However, when it comes to the other choices that Garen has to upgrade this item, you're not really seeing it too much. Profane Hydra is the only entry here where this item actually has application in putting into your inventory for its eventual upgrade. I would love to see more items that use this in its build path, because I do think that Brutalizer is super cool to have, and it feels very stat efficient. It gives Garen a lot of great lever amps. But I just don't think that you're really building it too much unless you're going Profane, as I said before. And it's got to compete with other components too, like Zeal, Dark, all that jazz. So I'm gonna say it's decent. I'm gonna say it's decent. Like the only context we're really building it in is if we're going Profane Hydra. But it's other than that, you're not seeing it in your build ever, realistically. And I don't think you're gonna sit on it as a component either. I just don't see that desire or that need. Okay. Next up is Last Whisper. Last Whisper is the child to the parent figures of Lord Dominik's and Mortal Reminder. You're often getting this as a component first, and then upgrading it into one of the aforementioned. It offers attack damage and armor penetration that is flat, and that amount is not something that you could ever scoff at. And what's cool is that you get to upgrade it into more attack damage and armor penetration on top of throwing critical strike. So you're basically creating a very, very small egg that hatches into a chicken that does a ton of damage. I'm going to say Last Whisper is definitely going to be among the best of the best, because in games where you're planning on building Lord Dominik's or Mortal Reminder, it never, ever feels bad to have in your inventory, and you are going to hit so much harder by just even sitting on this item. So for that reason, it's going to have that honorable mention. All right. Hex Drinker has always been a little bit of a curious case. Oh gosh, how can I talk about this item without talking about Sterak's? It's just it's really hard. It's really hard. I feel like Sterak's has overshadowed this item for league generation to league generation. And like as long as this thing has the Hex, like the lifeline passive, like I just don't think this thing can stack up the Sterak's gauge, and I don't expect it to ever lose that identity unless they make some radical change to the game. But even then, it's very dangerous for them to separate the identity of Sterak's and Hex Drinker, because like if we have champions who stack both items again, like I remember Graves in Season 9 was stacking Sterak's gauge and Hex Drinker, and that was so toxic for the game. So I am not advocating for Riot Games to have touched this. I think we just need to accept that Challenger is just not as good as Sterak's Gauge, and maybe it can only ever really be built in games where you're planning on going for the all-in with a spell shield. But even then, I'm gonna say, why not just take Nullifying Orb? If I'm taking on Rumble and I actually want to run him down with Ghost Ignite, I'm just gonna take Nullifying Orb. Why am I opting for Hexdrinker when I could just go ahead and get Stridebreaker, you know? Or just like keep my components intact for Stridebreaker so Stridebreaker's not delayed. So I'm not gonna say that Hexdrinker is really good. I never build it in my games. I'm gonna call it bad. And if I do hurt your feelings upon saying this, well, I do apologize in advance. Maybe you can prove me wrong someday. Let's talk about Wit's End next. Wit's End has no more attack damage. It's got the on hit, which is okay for Garen, not the best. Garen doesn't always auto attack. He only auto attacks sometimes, as we acknowledged. But it's got 55% attack speed, which is 2 spins. That is seriously impressive. There are not so many items anymore that have 50% attack speed. This one's got 55. So you get 2 spins and then some left over for your natural scaling. And then it's got 20% tenacity, which I think is really, really cool. I don't think it's a flat stack add-on to Sterak's. So if you get Sterak's and Wit's End, you're probably going to deal with a little bit of a multiplicative penalty. So there is something to keep in mind there. However, I do think that Wit's End is really, really good. The only problem the item deals with is that the timing of the item feels very precise and sometimes not convenient enough to really go out of your way for. I do think that like if you're split pushing versus a mage, Wit's End could be insanely good, not just for taking towers, but for dueling. Like, I think that messing up a late game Diana or Gwen with this item could actually be really, really good. I just find that it's harder to really build it. So I'm going to say, I'm going to put this in the category of amazing sometimes, because I do think that it has high potential. But it really comes down to the context of the game. I think the potential is super, super high. And like the 20% tenacity for the Gecko is something you can't scoff at, like 100%. All right. Tenacity doesn't stack. The tenacity does stack, but it stacks multiplicatively, not additively. So there is going to be a bit of a penalty as far as I'm aware. Unless I'm wrong, unless I don't know if somebody can with the practice scope right now, but I'm very, very confident that if you build Sterak's Gauge and Wit's End, that you're not going to get 40% tenacity. It's gonna penalize you. So there is going to be that to expect, because every Garen player should have Sterak's at some point in their build. Very rarely do you ever not. Let's talk about Hearthbone Axe next. Hearthbone Axe has attack damage and attack speed. It's a very simple item. It's very, very effective. It gives Garen extra spins, extra attack damage. This item is basically something you put in your inventory when you want to go ahead and amplify Garen's wave clear, and you don't have a necessity for his other components. So, like, yes, Hearthbone Axe has to compete with Phage. It has to compete with Sheen, which are disgustingly good components. I'm gonna say that you can never really you can never really suffer from having this in your inventory, because you're often building it into something great. So I'm gonna say it's in the often great category. Because oftentimes when you're building it and it's in your inventory, you're on your way to upgrading it to an amazing item that feels fantastic, right? Trinity Force, Stridebreaker, you know? Actually, wait, I don't think it's Stridebreaker. Yeah, no, it's Stridebreaker. It's not in Stridebreaker's build path anymore. It's part of Trinity Force though. It's part of Trinity Forces, and that's really, really good. Actually, let's see what this thing, what else this thing builds into. It builds into Fan Dancer right now, but I think that's being scrapped if I recall correctly. So let's look at attack damage here. Hearthbone Axe. Okay, so it builds into Fan Dancer, which I don't know if it's gonna stay, but it builds into Trinity Force, so that's good. It's the child of Trinity Force, so like, can't go wrong with that. Yeah, I know some people. Yeah, some people are even building it like double Hearthbone Axe too, which I find to be really, really interesting. But the item's gold efficiency is insane, absolutely insane. All right, so our next boot choice here in the discussion here is going to be Ionian Boots of Lucidity. Now I think that this item has more potential on Garen than some of you guys may think. And in any Garen build where you're focusing on item activations or passives that do damage, like Trinity Force, Hullbreaker, Sundered Sky, or in games where you're trying not to depend too much on spin damage and you're focusing more like on a utility build, or you're just focusing on Q short trades versus matchups where you're trying to keep cooldowns up as much as possible, Ionian Boots actually feel amazing on Garen. And then there's the added benefit of reducing summoner spells, which if you take that in tandem with Ghost and Flash is actually an insane amplification. It's hard for me to say that Ionian Boots are like something you should get every game, but there are many contexts, many games where Ionian Boots are really, really good. In fact, you know, I'm going to say, like, you can build them in a lot of your games, even. So I'm going to actually put this in the often great category. They slimmed the price of this item by 50 gold this season, which just straight up buffs this item. So until they nerf it again, I'm going to put this in this category. Keep your eyes out on Ionian Boots, guys, because it's not always just going to be about Berserker Glaives. Sometimes having Summoner Spell access is really, really important for Garen to have impact into the mid to late game, because sometimes you can't catch your target unless you have that sum up. All right? Let's go ahead and move on to our next item here, which is going to be Opportunity. Now, I'm so glad I'm taking the... I'm not going to say it. Yeah, so I'm so glad we're going to talk about this item here. I've tried it out for a few games. I thought I really would like it. And you guys are saying, oh, well, Riss is about to say something bad about this item. This item on paper feels amazing, and it's got a lot of damage to boot. You know, it's got attack damage, it's got lethality, it's got a bit of movement speed too. But the problem is that it competes so heavily with Youmuu's Ghostblade that Youmuu's Ghostblade kind of crowds out the possibility of purchasing this item. I just don't think it's as strong as Youmuu's. Like, sure, it might do a little bit more damage than Youmuu's, but if we were to ask ourselves, if I was to poll my audience, okay, what is the most valuable stat on Garen in League of Legends? I bet a lot of you guys, without even like polling you guys, would probably say movement speed. And when we have to compare two items, and one item has such a strong identity that it amplifies one stat that Garen wants more than any other thing, Youmuu's Ghostblade is going to go ahead and beat out Opportunity, because unfortunately a completed item that offers only a little bit of movement speed is not going to be able to hold a candlestick to what Youmuu's Ghostblade offers. For that reason, I'm going to say that Opportunity is decent. Like, I think that it's an alright item. It's decent. It's like, it's not bad. It's not amazing. It just is. So like, unless they poke around with the stats on this item to the point, or where like Youmuu's is super nerfed, and they try to push this item, which I feel like if they don't see people building this item, they'll go ahead and buff it. So maybe my stance will change on this. But right now, its current iteration just doesn't really stir the pot well enough for me to say, yeah, you guys got to build this in this game. Yeah, you guys should look out for this item. You should look out for this opportunity. Look out for the opportunity. All right. Moving on. Let's talk about Maw of Malmortius. Maw of Malmortius is definitely an interesting one. Gosh, do I actually have really something substantial to say here other than it's an upgrade from Hex Shrinker and has to compete with Sterex Gauge? No, I probably don't. You know, I've rambled on with a lot of items. I'm just not gonna do it with this item. All right, spoiler. You guys, I'm sorry to break it to you. I never build this item. I just never do. And ever since they ripped the Omnivamp off this item and just given you like, what lifesteal I think its current iteration gives you, I just don't think it's good. At any game where I see I need a magic resistance item, I never once in my entire life think, oh, Hex Drinker would be so good. And I'm not playing versus 5 AP solo queue team comps. That has not happened to me since 1997. So, yeah, I'm going to say Hex Drinker, Maw is bad. Yeah, Maw is pretty bad. All right, so I am definitely dealing with a little bit of afterglow here talking about this item. But I'm going to dial it back a bit because I want to be as fair as possible. Let's talk about Edge of Night. So, Edge of Night, I think, is extremely, extremely good. It's not only extremely good, but it's insanely fun just to have a spell shield on Garen. But this item often falls into the make or break category because it is insanely good at countering certain champions, especially champions that have a really difficult time getting rid of that spell shield. Tristana, it's amazing versus Tristana. Singed, I won a game split pushing versus Singed by building Edge of Night. And oh my god, again, I'm dealing with the Afterglow. This item is insane in the right context. I think that it's going to be more difficult for Edge of Night to be a viable item because the more champions get released, the more you're going to have a lot of clutter and stuff flying around the map, skill shots flying everywhere. It's harder to preserve the shield, especially in a teamfight situation. But if you are looking in a position where you're planning on split pushing or approaching teamfights where you don't need to engage, but instead to flank, Edge of Night should be a consideration that should always be in your mind. And I do think in the context of those aforementioned applications, Edge of Night has a spot in Amazing sometimes. I can't say anything more than that. This item is the sauce when the time is right. All right. Yes, Vayne. Also Vayne. Yes, somebody in chat just said Vayne. Yeah, it is anti-Vayne.exe. Let's talk about Chempunk Chainsword next. So this item has to compete with Mortal Reminder, and historically that's always been the case. I do think this last season when CDR Garen was a thing, this item had a lot of insane potential because it offered 25 ability haste, and I thought that was really cool. Now that CDR Garen really isn't a thing, it's harder to stack ability haste in season 14. Gore Drinker is gone. I just don't see the potential here. Like, unless I'm super behind and I want to build Grievous Wounds, and I'm saying, you know, it's not a game where I want to go Thormill, like, I am not really building Chempunk Chainsword. I always prefer Mortal Reminder because it's just that much more valuable, you know? Late game, I'm not really looking for ability haste options unless I'm blatantly ahead and I'm using it as like a shopping point for what I'm getting next. So therefore, the criteria is too illegitimate for me to ever consider Chempunk Chainsword. We're actually going to call it bad. I just feel like this is not the season for Chempunk Chainsword. It just isn't. All right. Next up, let's talk about Blade the Ruined King. What did I say about this item? So, like, I want to say, okay, I'm imagining the one game where you're playing versus a 10k HP Scion, and mathematically, it is actually sensible for us to place Blade the Ruined King in this item, in an item slot and be able to build it. But, oh my god, it's just like the amount of mental gymnastics I have to go through, the amount of copium I have to literally drink to be able to say this item is good on Garen is a outstanding, incredible amount. And I just think that until Garen ever gets on hit on his spin, if that ever happens, I just don't think that Blade the Ruined King is ever going to be that item for Garen. You know, it's one of those items that you wish it was good, but it just isn't, you know? Like, almost like store-bought brand ice cream. You know, you wish it's good. You see it in the freezer for $2. You know it's on sale, but you know when you bring it home, it's just not going to be it. It's just not. So, like, that's how I view Blade the Ruined King. It's bad. All right, I think I rest my case there. Next up, let's talk about Caulfield's Warhammer. So Caulfield's built into a multitude of Garen items. So sitting in its inventory, you know, you have a lot of flex options, even if you do want to pivot your choice here. You know, you have the Spear of Shojin, which is a little bit of an interesting thing. You have Death's Dance, which only is good sometimes. The most shockingly noticeable thing here is that it's no longer a component for Black Claver, and that's when I really like the item. You can build it into Surrender Sky, so I guess that's the one solid replacement. That's probably going to be the most bought item, or the most upgraded item that you upgrade your Caulfields into. It offers ability haste and attack damage, stats that Garen really can't, you know, scoff at. You know, it slims about 10 seconds off of 10-15 seconds off his ultimate, so like in laning phase that does have impact. It's just a good overall component. Is it the best component? No, it isn't. It's just good. I'm gonna say it's decent. You know, it does its job well, and that's it. You know, it's like a reliable plumber. You know, we really can't go anywhere with this. You know, we really can't go too far. It's okay. Let's talk about the returning champion Phage. I am so happy they brought this item back into the equation. And in its iteration that it did, I think that the health regeneration component passive was good, but like, oh my god, the identity of having bonus movement speed on hit with Phage is just something that is so sorely needed to take on certain range matchups. And now melee champions having access to the item is just such a sight for sore eyes. Um, it offers health. It offers movement speed on hit. It offers attack damage. It's just really, really good. And I have solved so many range matchups by getting this item first. So if you guys are in a range matchup and you guys want target access, Phage is one of the friendliest items you could pick up. And it builds into your either Stridebreaker or Trinity Force, so you can't go wrong with it. Even builds into Black Cleaver. You know, any game where I see a Garen player having Phage in inventory, I know something good's bound to come from it, because it's gonna get upgraded into something great. It's like the 3 starter Pokemon from Kanto. You know, it's like either Bulbasaur, Squirtle, or Charizard. It's gonna evolve into something great no matter how you break it. So I'm gonna say it's among the best of the best. This is such an insane component, and I hope Riot Games never changes it the way that like they did in the past before. All right. I see Bombi Cinder here again. We already talked about that. I love Bombi so much that I included it twice, so I'm just so biased here. Yep, Gale Force is going to the back here because I was being silly. Experimental Hexplate. Oh boy, this is gonna be a interesting one. So I had a lot of people come in my chat with the buzz of this item, being like, "Oh yeah, this player is building experimental Hexplate. This player is experimenting with the Hexplate." I'm like, "Okay, this is cool. This is cool. Why are people building this item though?" And then like I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay. I see some stuff. Like I see the potential here, right? It's got some good things going for it. But like, let's take a look at the stats here. All right, put this on the screen here. Okay, so it's got 55 attack damage, 20 attack speed, 300 health. So like all stats that Garen really enjoys. It has the Hex Charge passive, which reduces your ultimate's cooldown. So like in a context of snowballing, this item can actually be really insane. And then after you cast your ultimate, you gain attack speed and bonus movement speed for a short duration. I don't know if it's going to show us the values here. I would actually have to look it up. Yeah, you know, before I pass my final verdict on this, let me look up the actual number here, because I do think that is pertinent to the equation here of how we do that. So it's 15% bonus movement speed for 8 seconds. So like, I think that it's a pretty good item. The only thing I don't like about this item is that the attack speed it gives you, like the attack speed it gives you, is not really that appreciated. It doesn't augment Garen spins. So like, there's that. But like everything else in the item feels really good. I could say it's a mystery because people, you know, like maybe there's some champions who haven't, like some players, some people playing Garen haven't solved this item yet. And maybe there's still some solving left to do. But I already see people piloting it and finding some, you know, some varying amounts of success with it. I'm not going to say it's amazing, but I do think that it has potential. So I think like right now, I'm just going to put it in decent because like, I do think that it has incredible potential. It's just like, again, like what's the timing of the item? Like, when do we want to build this? When do we want to like really reach out for this item? And like, do we actually find value that's applicable with the activation on ultimate? You know, I think it's more of a snowball item rather than a, hey, the game is going smooth, should we offer this item? So it's conditional from the get-go. It's even more conditional based on what it gives you. So I'm gonna say it's like, it's decent. I think that maybe I'm wrong about this assessment. Maybe I will have a different opinion in the future, but this is where I want to rank the item. Okay. Tunneler is an item that gives health and attack damage. It's basically, yeah, that's basically it. This reminds me a lot of Yarm's Fist, where it had like a stacking HP component, and this right now builds into Sterix Gauge. It also builds into some other items too, if I recall correctly. Let me try to remember what that is. Hold on here. I'm cooking. Okay, it builds into, oh yeah, Hullbreaker. Builds into Edge Knight. Okay. It builds into the Hexplate. Okay, cool. It builds into, yeah, so like this is a really solid component. It builds into a ton of items. Garen can build every single one of these items that you see on the screen except Titanic. That's 5 out of 6. That is really, really good. 250 health, which is 100 health more then Phage, but it doesn't have the movement speed passive, which kind of feels sad. But, you know, in situations where you do value that 100 HP more for sustain, amplifying Garen's W, I think there's a lot to be had in that concept. So, and because it builds into so many amazing items, I'm going to say it's one of the best. You know, like, you can never really feel bad about this being in your inventory. It's a solid component. Mortal Reminder. Can I really preach on about this item, you know, any more than I need to? I think you guys already know, it's still insane. You need grievous wounds, you need armor penetration, you need attack damage. It's the best of the best. Lord Dominic's Regards, I think, has always had a difficult bout of competition with Mortal Reminder because its stats are pretty similar. The only thing that Lord Dominic's really has, you know, where Lord Dominic's lacks in grievous wounds, it makes up for critical strikes, so you technically do a lot more damage with Lord Dominic's. And even though Garen does stack a lot of HP in most of his builds modernly today, you will sometimes utilize the Giant Slayer passive versus certain champions who are stacking a tremendous amount of health. So, like, let's say, for example, you're playing versus Scion. Lord Dominos is applicable, right? But yeah, I don't build it every game, and there are a lot of games where I just don't even consider it. So I'm gonna say in the right context, it's amazing sometimes. Yeah, like it really comes down to you not needing grievous wounds and you actually playing versus somebody who's stacking health out of the wazoo. But when you do build it and when the context is appropriate, this item hits like a truck. So I really do like it. Now, Mercurial Scimitar is something that a lot of people just don't build. I see ADCs build it. I see a lot of Zayas build it. There's a lot of ADCs who build it. The ADC class is the one that builds this item the most. Does Garen actually have value in this item? It's a little bit. It's got attack damage. It's got a crit. It's got magic resistance, which is really cool. But would I ever want to build this item first? I think that maybe there is a solution to some matchups that involve this item that we haven't come up with yet. But I just haven't been able to ascertain how good this item is. And is it worthy for a 6-item inclusion in Garen's build late game? Yeah. So, like, I'm going to put this in mystery because I think that Mercurial Scimitar has a ton of potential. I just don't see any Garen's building it. I do think that it has application, though. I'm not going to say it's a bad item, because there's a lot of things about this item that a Garen player can appreciate. And then also having a giant movement speed boost when you cleanse crowd control is insane for chasing or escaping. We cannot discount that. All right, next up, let's talk about Static Shiv. And let me look at the build path correctly here, so that way I know what I'm talking about here. Static Shiv. Okay, so this is its build path right now. We get Noon Quiver, which is a decent component. It's 30 attack damage and 15% attack speed. Cloak of Agility, and then Kirchi's Shard, which is attack damage with magic damage on hit. This thing has 50 attack damage, 30% attack speed, and 20% critical strike chance. You know, the stats aren't bad. Like, I want to say this item is bad automatically, but when I look at numbers like this, I'm thinking, okay, it's not a bad item. The only problem is that the stat, like, the passive isn't as valuable on Garen. And I like this item a lot more when it offered movement speed. If they changed this item somehow to include movement speed, I would actually want to build it. I think that Garen is one of the easiest champions to wave clear with. One thing that is noteworthy about this item is that if you guys have triple inhibitors down, you guys are probably pushing waves the fastest with Static Shiv. I have never reached a game personally where I'm like dying to like put another item in my inventory and I want to push out waves and I want to the Soul Defender or base. But technically, Static Shiv would be one of the best items to build to play 1v5 base defense while your team is basically trying to win the game. So I'm going to say it has some extremely niche application. However, I don't think it's really consistently good to build. So I'm going to say, like, this item could only realistically ever be good if you're dealing with triple inhibs and you're just, like, trying to push supers out of base as quickly as possible. Because remember, keep in mind, guys, that super minions have negative magic resistance. So the activation proc on Static Shiv actually does more damage to supers than champions or monsters in most cases. So I'm going to say this is a little bit of a spice take here, but Static Shiv could maybe be good in games when you're behind, and only if you're trying to push out the base and you're the sole person defending. Going back to a starter items, we got 2 here coming up here. Let's talk about Coal. Now, Coal is an item that I think that a lot more champions abuse easily than Garen, and it's very dangerous to go ahead and build this item because, like, there's a lot of champions, especially if you guys are playing an MMR where your opponents know how to punish you and they're looking to punish you. It's difficult to get away with call. Like, if you cheat a recall for it, that's great. But like, we're gonna judge this item based on its starting item potential. I feel like that's the fairest way to evaluate it since I've been doing the same type of criteria for all these starting items. All is okay, but you could only realistically take it into the freest of free matchups. Like, I'm talking about Yumi top lane. Maybe Nasus if you could confirm he's not going AP. There's maybe a few other outliers out there that I can't think of this moment, but it's not a bad starting item. Would I ever build it deliberately? No, not really. Unless I'm getting the freest of free matchup. So I don't build it too often. It's an item that you probably will only build maybe 1 out of every 20 games, even if that, you know. I think that, like, having the rebate and gold is really cool, and the attack damage, and you get to hold onto it as a component for 7 attack damage, which is basically equivalent to a Gathering Storm stack, so that's cool. Well, let's just call it decent. I don't think Garen is, like, the top 10 cold champion, and I would heavily disagree with anybody who tries to put him on a list of top 10 cold champions. Okay? Doran Shield. You know, they buffed this item last season when it was already amazing. Extra 30 health, extra 5 per 10 in regeneration. Helps you last hit minions. Like, need I say more? Like, built by 99% of all Garen players in their Garen games. Like, what else can I say about this item? It's amazing. It's the best of the best. And Garen players will never stop building Doran Shield unless they heavily nerf this item. All right? Anathema's Chains, like, this doesn't even have to apply to Garen. Anathema's Chains is just good to build on any champion, especially if you're taking on a threat who is vulnerable to crowd control and your team has crowd control, or it's good in situations where you're playing versus a champion who has so many ample penetration sources that building resistances versus them don't matter, and they don't have % maximum HP damage. So, like, a good example of this is Kayle. Kayle doesn't really have those values as much, but she gets magic and armor penetration super easily. Another great example of this for amplifying crowd control is Evelynn. Evelynn players almost always take domination into sorcery, and they almost never tap into tenacity. So if you dip their tenacity into the negative values and you have somebody on your team who's very reliable in crowd control, you can shut an Evelynn down 100%. Like, I think Anathema's is one of the most sleeper OP items in this game, and not enough people build this item. I would like to even see Marksman build this item late game to counter certain champions. Like, if you're versus a Fed Evelynn, you're ADC late game, any ADC player watching the stream right now, try Anathema's Chains in your game and come back to me and let me know how you did. Because oftentimes, I have a hunch that you are going to do good and you're going to live. Versus Kha'Zix with 3 armor penetration items, get Anathemas on that thing. He can't take away that 30% damage reduction on you. So, like, Garen also benefits from this item too because it's got ability, haste, and health. So, like, stats are amazing. It's amazing. Sometimes it's amazing. All right, so we're going to talk about the other child in the room here, the other Spellblade item, Iceborne Gauntlet. I want to put this in the same category as the Cyclosword, but honestly, I don't think Iceborne's good on Garen. The reason why is because, yes, the AoE slow that it provides on hit is cool and all, and it's got armor, it's got, you know, it's got all those stats that are fun, but the problem with the item is that, like, unless for some reason you need to stay up on top of your target, it doesn't have any dashes or anything like that. It doesn't solve much for Garen because it trickles down to the category of, can I reach my target? If not, if I can't, then this item is bad. Iceborne Gauntlet is literally fitting into that category right now. So I don't like it. I don't have any game where I've ever run into where I say, I need Iceborne Gauntlet this game. I'm going to say it's bad. Yeah, I'm going to say it's bad. Rainowind's Omen has been sharpened in Identity. They nerfed its stats a little bit, but now it reduces more critical strike damage now than ever. So the context where you're playing versus multiple critical strike users, Rainowind's is insane. It is literally the Achilles heel for certain team comps. If you're playing versus Trinivir and they have a bot lane EDC building critical strike items, it's a no-brainer that this item should be in your inventory. So it is just amazing sometimes. Am I building it every game? No, unfortunately not. It does have to compete with some other armor or choices, and it doesn't offer movement speed. However, in the correct context, this item is the best armor item you could build. Let's talk about Rookern, which gives a magic damage shield out of combat. Now, this is actually really interesting. I like this item a lot better than Hex Drinker and Maul Mortis because it does not conflict with the lifeline passive of Sterix Gauge. Its shield is really, really amazing. The only concerning part is that if you take it and you're getting Sterix Gauge, that means you technically are a champion with 3 shield sources, excluding any shields that you get from your team and on the map, whether it be through plants or Earth Soul. So it does make you more vulnerable to a Serpent's Fang purchase. However, I do think this item has a lot of potential, and especially versus games where you do need a shield to be able to deal with a mage, or you're trying to get, or you're being blown up by a mage. The magic damage shield is something not to scoff at, because if you stack health on Garen, you amplify it with other sources like scaling HP stat shards or like overgrowth, the shield can be amazing. So I like, even though I haven't evaluated it as much, I do think that this is an amazing choice. It just depends on the context of the game. You should expect to see it in some of my games in the future. I definitely want to take this item out for a spin. I think its potential is unrivaled in some categories. All right. Abyssal Mask feels a little bit sadder, and it's been harder to revisit this item ever since they removed the aspect of it where it applies a refreshing stack of Phase Rush every few seconds, which I used to use back in Season 9 to proc Phase Rush, and I felt like this is amazing. I would only get this item in games where you have a lot of AP damage and you're just trying to be that frontliner tank for your team and you're trying to amplify magic damage, because at that point, this item is actually really good. But you would never go away out of your way deliberately to build it unless you have that criteria of having 2 to 3 mages on your team and they're already doing amazing, like Karthus, for example. All right? That's all I have to say about that. Sunfire Cape does not feel good to upgrade into. Bommies feels great, but Sunfire does not. It's okay. Like, it's probably okay if you build it if you're behind and you're desperate to hold on for dear life. But I would never say in any situation, okay, I'm even with my opponent or I'm ahead, I'm just going to upgrade the Sunfire. It's just the history of this item. Sunfire is never good, extremely good to rush by design unless it's busted. And if it's busted, then it's Sunfire meta and everyone's building it. So therefore, right, nerfs it, and then we go back to square one. I feel like I don't need to say anything more about this. Sunfire, I'd say just sit on bombies. Don't look to upgrade the Sunfire unless you're critically behind and you're just trying to hold on for dear life. Force of Nature feels interesting because it gives you 70%. I'm sorry, not 70%. It gives you 70 flat magic resistance. But it doesn't activate instantly. You have to be in combat for a while to be able to use it. So, like, situationally, like, if you're in scrappy fights and you're healing a lot, like with Fleet Footwork or Conqueror, and you're going for an extended fight versus a mage, it could be insane. The gold efficiency of this item cranks well over 200%, I'm certain. However, because there's a lot of fights that you can take versus mages that are very quick and decisive, Force of Nature unfortunately doesn't offer that much right off the bat. You have to commit to an extended fight to be able to make it work. And then even at that point, it has to compete with other choices. Like, if I'm taking Conqueror and Fleet, then why am I not taking Spirit Visage? Why am I not taking Rookern? So I think that there's a lot of solving to do with Force of Nature, and we don't quite know how it lands in terms of the hierarchy here. I think that item has some potential, but it's just got too much competition to say for certain that we should ever really build it. So let's go ahead and put Force of Nature into Mystery. All right. Spirit Visage, on the other hand, though, is just downright amazing. And like any comp where you have a healer on your team, like Seraphine, Sona, Soraka, you guys need to be building this item more. It amplifies the healing from so many sources. And like Garen, like using this item to help buff his passive to get back in the fights is actually really well appreciated, because Garen's passive operates actually really slow late game. Sometimes you need that extra boost from Spirit Visage. But I would agree with anybody who says, RISTE, you should probably only really build it if you have healing and shield sources on your team. Shen, Sona, Soraka, Seraphine, Jaina even, all that jazz, Yumi. It's very situational. It feels amazing sometimes. If you have Earth Soul, this amplifies the shield. If you have Ocean Soul, Spirit Visage is a no-brainer buy. But it really comes down to the individual context here. So for that reason, I'm going to say amazing sometimes. Oh boy, Thornmail. What do I want to say about Thornmail? Thornmail. Well, it's Thornmail. You know, I can't really say it's anything but Thornmail. I find it really difficult about Thornmail and Garen, just because of Mortal Wonder being part of the game. And, like, would there ever be a game where you say, let's build Mortal Wonder and Thornmail? We need double Grievous Wounds? No, probably not. Thornmail is okay. It's okay, but, like, I would never build it unless I'm behind. Yeah, so, like, I feel like there's no other category I could put this in. And I want to say it's bad because there are technically some games where it is actually good. Full AD team comps. Like Thornmail, is like they're like you have a Draven, they have Master Yi, like I don't know, like Aurelia top lane, they're running full AD for some strange reason in your solo queue game. Thornmail does application there. So like there is that. So I'm not gonna call it bad. I'm gonna say only good behind. You could even put in decent tier. Like I could say it's decent. It's okay. You know, like it's full AD, you know, whether you're behind or ahead, Thornmail has applications. So let's actually just bump it up to decent. It's okay. Next up is Heartsteel. So it was actually pretty hyped by a lot of players. This item would not be a mythic, and you just go ahead and have as a legendary. However, there's only really one playstyle where I think there's ever compatibility with this item, and that is Grasp of the Undying Garen, right? Because you're trying to scrap up, you're trying to get stacks, so it integrates with the playstyle itself. The only problem, though, is that I think it's only ever really good to build if you're behind and your opponent can't punish you for stacking HP. So you're dealing with like maybe an Assassin top lane or something, you're taking Grasp of the Undying. Because oftentimes you're taking Grasp of the Undying, you don't want to build this first, even though it looks so lucrative. You want to build Trinity Force, right? Or Sundered Sky or Hullbreaker. So like, I don't think Heartsteel is really like screaming at a Garen player ever to say, build me, because like it has to, it's not the loudest voice in the room. All right. Yaksho is amazing sometimes. This item can be built as a 6 item just to turbo amplify all of Garen's resistances, and that feels downright amazing. This item has a spot in Garen's build. I've had several people come to my stream saying it's amazing, and I do agree. As a 6 item build finisher, and only that, this item can help create a ton of effective HP for Garen, and it feels just really good to have in your inventory. It really helps make that effective HP concrete. Especially when you're in games where you're building a lot of bruiser items, but you're just lacking those resistances, and you don't want to commit to either category, so you finish off your build with Yaksho. It's a really, really nice finisher. It's amazing, the application, but only sometimes. There are going to be some games where you need a 6 item, and it's just not going to be Yaksho because you need something else entirely. So I'm going to leave it at that. Amazing sometimes will be Yaksho's place. All right. Well, everyone get your copium out, because we're going to be talking about Frozen Heart. I have so many people talk to me about this, and I think if there was any patch where you would ever entertain building this item, it would be this patch right before it gets nerfed, because the item is insanely gold efficient. They overbuff this item way too much. So I'm going to say it's decent, but like after it gets nerfed, it's going to be bad on Garen. I just don't think it's going to be good. Most of the items' gold efficiency is dedicated towards mana, which is a stat that Garen cannot even use. And even though he does have it has the passive of reducing attack speed AoE, I still can't value this over something like having Renown's Omen in my inventory, which offers health, and I value the Cold Steel passive almost as much as attack speed reduction. So for that result, that I will put Frozen Heart in bad. All right, guys, and we just got a few items here to take care of. Death's Dance is also very situationally good. It's decent. It's something that you don't build every game, but it's good into full AD team comps. I feel like we don't really need to talk about that too much. If you're playing versus a 4 or 5 AD champions, Death's Dance feels really nice. Garen's not one of the best users of the item, but it does feel really nice to have versus that AD of a team comp, and it's going to remain that way as long as the item is balanced that way. Bramble Vest. Probably only really building this if behind, but it can be in the decent category too. It's in the same boat as Thornmail. It's decent. It's like, ideally when you want to build Grievous Wounds, you want to build Executioners. So I'll actually pull Executioners up here. We'll just jump to Executioners here, because I want to talk about this. This is the better item to have if you want to apply Grievous Wounds, because you can only apply Grievous Wounds from Bramble Vest if you're getting auto attack, but like with Executioners, you get to decide that as long as you're choosing your positioning well, and you can apply it to multiple targets. That's actually really cool. You can apply it to multiple targets with Bramble Vest too, but they have to all be attacking you. Sometimes that's not favorable for you. Warden's Mail. Amazing sometimes. There are certain team comps that are just downright countered with this item. It's in the same boat as Steel Caps. Sometimes you can join both in unison and get insane value out of it. Like, Warden's Mill is one of the best defensive items in the game. In the right context, versus auto attack champions, the damage reduction is insane, and you shouldn't discount it. Aegis is amazing sometimes too, I think. The reason why is because this item is already over 100% gold efficient. If you have Garen Sub fully stacked and an Earth Drake, it pushes that gold efficiency further to the point where you're now getting maybe 40 magic resistance and armor off this item instead of 30. And it just feels really, really good. This is a precursor to Jaksho, right? So, you know, however you're upgrading this item is up to you. But you're going to have a lot of value later on by upgrading this if you just sit on it. So, like, sometimes in the situation where you're one at frontline, you're going to be able to find a lot of cool value in this item. So don't forget about Aegis. Let's talk about Negatron Cloak. I feel like that's the same category to, like, for the same criteria, right? 50 magic resistance can sometimes be amplified by Garen Sub being fully stacked or Drake. Oftentimes, this is going to build into something great, so we'll go by the same criteria here. The same can be applied to Chain Vest too, honestly. Like, whether it's going to be built, you know, I do think it's a little bit more common than Negatron Cloak. Oh wait, people are telling me in chat that Aegis doesn't exist anymore. Oh dang! All right, never mind. Sorry, rest in peace, Aegis. Oh my gosh, how did I know that Aegis didn't exist? All right, sorry, Aegis, you've been removed from the island there. All right, you know, that's me. I'm just memeing. Chain Vest is a little bit more commonplace than Negatron Cloak, I find, in most of my games, because oftentimes you're building Chain Vest, you're often upgrading it into like Guardian Angel or Demon's Plate, so it's going to be a little bit more common, which is why I'm going to say often great, because it fits that often category. Yeah, other than that, I don't really have too much to say here. Wing Moon Plate is often in the same category because, you know, most of the games you're building items that include this as a component, whether it be Hullbreaker, you know, Demon's Plate. You know, I really can't say anything other than that. Moonplate feels really great to sit on. 5% MS is nothing to scoff at. It's basically 15%. 15 MS for Garen, maybe 18 to 20, depending on if you take Insularity or not. Yeah, that's all I got to say about this. Let's talk about Terminus. Most of the value of this item comes from auto attacking. Yeah, most of the value of this item comes from auto attacking. I don't really like it. I don't really like it. Like, if I had Rageblade in this list, I'd probably put Rageblade there too. I just feel like that this is meant for other champions. Garen is not that one. If you guys really want to use this item, I would recommend playing a different champion, because Terminus is just not going to be it. Unless they change this item to include more stats and they let up on the passive bit, it's going to remain that way for a very long time. All right. Now, I made this very special category for all you hooligans out there, because I know people in the comments are going to be like, where's the AP items, Rist? So here is the entire AP item package, and representing our AP item package here is the Ambassador ability power items, Rabadon's Death Cap. And you know, Rabadon's Death Cap and AP items have such a special place in the heart of Garen mains. In fact, I had to create a special row for you guys just to go ahead and talk about this. They're going to be comfortably down here. No, it's not economy. This is first class. Yep. So here you go, Rabadons. You're in a class of its own. Isn't that something special? It's definitely something special. Let's talk about Hubris. This is an item I'm butchering in pronunciation automatically. Let's look this up really quickly. Some people have been asking me about the potential of this item, and I do not know how to feel about this item. So it reminds me of Sword of the Occult. And like, that's kind of cool. You get moon speed after killing champions. You gain lethality outside of combat. This item seems very interesting to try out on Garen. You probably would take it in Garen builds. If you wanted to try this item, try it in a build where you have Ghost of Flash. Because like, one thing that this item has to compete with is Zoma's Ghostblade, but you could argue that you can maybe build this if you have Ghost Flash. It grants lethality out of combat, so it's great for bursting. And then it's got a stack system too, based on the amount of trophies that you claim. So like, I think that as a smurf item for a Garen who's smurfing, there could be a lot of value to be found out of this item. But I wouldn't say that this is an item that I would ever look towards unless I'm deliberately snowballing, right? So there is that. There is definitely that. I'm gonna put this item in mystery because I do think that maybe there is potential out there for this item, but I just haven't seen anyone pilot it yet. And maybe there's an build that I can feature it in the future. Maybe I can showcase it. Maybe I can cook some sort of build. Who knows? Maybe it's gonna be me. Maybe it's gonna be somebody else. Maybe it's gonna be somebody in chat. But I'm gonna say that like maybe this item has a place. You know, there's nothing inherently bad about this item. I just don't know what to say about this item that says, hey, we should build it here and now. All right. So I think that's, yeah, I think that's it. Oh, wait, we gotta talk about 2 last items. Storm Razor and Navori Quickblades. So Storm Razor, unfortunately, you know, it's got a little bit of attack speed. It's got a little bit of attack damage, if I recall correctly. They didn't remove this item, right? Wait, hold on. Yeah, no, they still have it here. Yep, that's good. So it's got a little bit of attack speed, a little bit of attack damage, a little bit of crit. So like stats-wise, really good for amplifying Garen's damage, but the passive just like, there's so much to be desired in the passive because it just doesn't solve anything for Garen. It doesn't accomplish anything. It's just there. It's just bonus damage. If you reach a target, that's great. But like, what does Storm Razor have that competes with all these other items that have on hit, right? So like, I'm not gonna say Storm Razor is good. I'm gonna say it's probably bad. Maybe somebody proves me wrong, but I think Storm Razor's identity is just not sharp enough. The Razor is not sharp enough for Garen. Okay. Lastly, let's talk about Navori Quickblades. Now, Navori Quickblades got downward graded into a mythic, and now, you know, it reduces cooldowns when you are auto-attacking. So, like, you can say, oh, RISTE, I can go ahead and use my spin, and then start auto-attacking after. And, like, that's cool. Yeah, that's great. But, like, is that really valuable? Like, am I using this to duel? Am I using this to split push? I don't know. Let's look at this item and let's look at the criteria here because I think I need to dive a little bit deeper before I say my verdict here. So let's see. Your abilities deal increased damage based on critical strike chance. So there's that, right? Like in a crit heavy build, like this could be really good. Maybe this is even better than Infinity Edge in a crit dedicated build. I don't know. Someone's gonna have to run the numbers, and like I think it's gonna be unfair for me to place it in any category other than the same category as IE because I do think it is a big competitor to IE itself. And I'm sorry to anybody who I disappoint by doing this, but I'm gonna put it into the mystery category because I don't know how good it is just yet. I think that there maybe is a build out there that can maybe make Quickblades work because it technically ability amplification. It puts me in the same category as Spirit Shojin. Could be really, really amazing on Garen in the right context. So there is that. There is definitely that. Yeah, and that wraps up all the items. Oh, wait, we're missing out Black Cleaver. Oh my god, I cannot believe I forgot about Black Cleaver. Hold on. I gotta fix that really quickly. How could I forget about Black Cleaver? Oh my god, it looks like we're gonna save one of the best for last. Holy flip. All right. Sorry, Black Cleaver. I have dishonored your name here by forgetting about good old Black Cleaver. Oh my god. I can't believe I almost forgot about Black Cleaver. Alright, guys. Here we go. Black Cleaver. So, Black Cleaver has historically been one of Garen's best bread and butter items. However, there are some games where I don't build it. I still think it's amazing. I still think you should include it in any game, especially where your team comp is AD heavy or your team is already rocking the house. You want to amplify that win condition by building Black Cleaver. That is good. It is maybe one of the reasons why I don't build it too often, that I kind of want to put it in often great. But the thing is, I can't quite say that I build Ghostblade every game. So, like, because of how historically amazing Black Cleaver has been for Garen, how reliable the item is, and how amazing its application is for your team, and how it sharpens Garen's identity by itself by playing as a armor-reducing champion, I can't help but put it in the best, because its identity is legendary on Garen, and I feel like it would be a disservice to put it in anything lower than that. So, I think, I think that wraps up my thoughts here. I hope you guys enjoyed this big breakdown, this massive breakdown. I really do think that Garen has a lot of attractive items to build this season. As you guys can see, I did list a lot of things higher than lower because I do see the potential for Garen building all these items. And I really don't want to call an item bad unless it truly is inherently bad. But if I missed something, or if you guys heavily disagree with a choice that I made, please let me know below in the comments. I'm always interested to hear what you guys have to say about it. But yeah, I think that's gonna be a wrap. I've gone on way too long with this list. I did not think it was gonna take this long, but I hope you guys enjoyed this watch. For everybody who did enjoy, I will see you guys later. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next Super Duper Demacia, baby. See you later.